I'm sure at a certain point in time, after playing your favorite video game, you thought, I want to make video games. But as we got older, we discovered that making video games isn't all fun and games, as games and the engines that make them are some of the most complex pieces of technology ever made. Some of us pushed past that though, and still had that passion, until we looked into the industry more and more and saw exactly how grueling and how disgusting it could be. 100-hour work weeks and toxic work environments most likely discouraged mostly everybody. But there were still a few left. A few who still wanted to push through all of that and create great experiences like the ones they grew up playing. And those are the developers of the games you play today. But as for the rest of us who fall in those first two categories, Microsoft published a game for us. It piqued a lot of people's interest when it was announced, including mine. But if you didn't own an Xbox before 2016, you most likely never heard of it. But despite that though, I consider it one of the most important games in the Xbox One's early lifespan, along with Rise, Son of Rome, and The Fighter Within. And the name of this game is Project Spark. A lot of you who picked up your Xbox a little bit later might have no idea what I'm talking about, and the rest of you may only have a vague memory. Don't worry, I'm going to explain everything. Look, Project Spark is unlike anything ever published by Microsoft, and honestly, it's unlike anything ever published by any major publisher. Honestly, I don't even want to call it a game. It's really not. It's more of a game creation suite with some sample games inside. It's closer to something like Unity or Unreal than anything else on the Xbox storefront. But let's start from the beginning. Before the shutdown and before Conquer, what was Project Spark in 2013? Project Spark in 2013, by the developer's own words, was an open world digital canvas that enabled anyone to build, play, and share whatever they can imagine. This sounds a bit like another game we're familiar with, right? No, let me get this out of the way right now. This game is nothing like Minecraft or Little Big Planet or Super Mario Maker. This was a tool designed to make entire game experiences, not a game creator within a game like Little Big Planet, and not a level editor like Super Mario Maker. This is an important distinction, make sure to keep it in mind as we continue. Project Spark was announced at E3 2013 and received a massive amount of hype, as it looked different than anything else the gaming public had ever seen before. They came out with a few flashy trailers and really roped everyone in, and I hate to admit it, but they got me too. The beta launched early 2014 and the reviews were glowing. Critics were starstruck by the game's openness and potential for the future. But if I'm being honest, I feel like they really weren't looking at the product in front of them, and they were more so focused on what it could be. And I don't want to say these critics were over-exaggerating because they really weren't at all. Nowadays, we have a lot of programs like Game Builder Garage, RPG Maker, and Dreams that really function similarly to Project Spark, but back in 2013, these were really rare to see. In fact, the closest comparison I could find that was even remotely similar is Kodu. Surprisingly, I didn't really see this comparison drawn anywhere else, but honestly, take a look at this and tell me they don't look similar. And just to make sure we're all on the same page, Kodu was released on the Xbox 360 in 2009, and it was really released as more of an educational tool to introduce kids to coding, instead of a game engine to make full game experiences, like Project Spark did. But even knowing that, just look, you can't help but notice the similarities. So at this point, a lot of you might be wondering, why am I still dragging on about Kodu? Well, Kodu managed to stand the test of time. It's lasted for 12 years and still has an active community, with new updates being published for it, new tutorials being posted, and new projects being shared on the internet, as recently as just a few months ago. And Project Spark couldn't even last 3 years. Despite being one of Microsoft's flagship titles and receiving so much funding and so much advertisement, just so much push from Microsoft. So what's the big difference? And with all of that out the way, let's finally talk about Project Spark. Project Spark officially released on October 7th, 2014 to a mixed reception overall. Don't get me wrong, a 73 isn't necessarily bad considering what it is, because like I've said multiple times, Project Spark is not a game. It has game experiences inside, if you want to call it that, but at best I would consider it a mini game collection. There's no amazing narrative to dig your teeth into, no deep gameplay to engage with, and the community aspect, which would become my favorite part and is really the lifeblood of the game, just didn't really exist on launch week, at least not like how it would. So the fact that a stripped down version of Unity that you were forced to play with a controller got a 73 on Metacritic is really admirable. And no matter who was reviewing the game, the critics all agreed on two facts. The game looked gorgeous, and the free-to-play model was the wrong way to go. And as far as the game's graphics, I'm really inclined to agree on that. I really like the aesthetic. It has like a stylized, cel-shaded type of look, really reminds me of Fable, and it's very nice to look at. As far as that free-to-play aspect though, well, let's go ahead and get into that. That freemium model, where you could download the game for free, but you had to purchase a majority of the content, is one of the 3 pillars that caused this game to fail spectacularly. To sum it up, this game featured in-game purchases, and those in-game purchases included additional objects and themes players could use in their own creations, as well as developer-made adventures, but we'll get into that. These in-game purchases could be bought with money, or with currency that you got by playing the game. The only problem with this is you earn this currency extremely slowly, so if you wanted to purchase new themes or buy new adventures, you'd either have to grind for weeks or cough up some real dollars. I mean, just think about it. This game advertised itself as free to play, but if you wanted to create something half decent or play even 80% of the curated content, you had to pay. And unfortunately for Project Spark, players just didn't want to. And I talked about the 3 pillars that contributed to the downfall of the game. Well, here's the second one. If you don't like making games, there was no reason to play this. Let's back up a little bit. As far as curated content or content that was made by the development team, there was Champion's Quest and there was a procedural mission mode, but we're going to focus on Champion's Quest. And yes, I know some of you might bring this up, eventually they did come out with things like Conquer and a few other developer-made game modes, but for right now, we're only going to focus on Champion's Quest. So Champion's Quest is a third-person action RPG mode with leveling, equipment, everything you'd expect in an RPG. And to be fair, I mean, it looks decent, it plays well enough, it's really riding that line of being a Fable clone, but it's decent for what it is. But that's just it though. The flagship developer-made mode that you're expected to pay for more episodes of is just average. I mean, the aesthetic is cool, but it really just lacks polish. It lacks something that reels you in and keeps you playing. And I think that described the game as a whole. Whether you wanted to make games or you wanted to play the games that others made, everything just lacked polish. It's obvious they just wanted to sell you on that potential and that hope that it would be good enough. And Conquer was just a byproduct of that. I won't be going into any detail about Conquer's big reunion. It was just irrelevant. It only lasted 1 episode, and no one really seemed to care for it at all. But Conquer and Champion's Quest had one thing in common though. They put up big paywalls in front of you if you wanted to continue playing. See, the first chapter of Champion's Quest was free, but after that you'd be paying $5 a pop for maybe 2-3 hours of gameplay at the absolute most. And Conquer was the same way, $5 an episode. Was it worth it? Obviously not. And last but not least, we're on to the third pillar that caused the game to fail, the community. See, unlike something like Dreams or RPG Maker, where the community puts out a lot of creative and innovative projects that really push these engines to the limits, the Project Spark community didn't do anything like that. For the most part, they just settled with pinball games, Tetris clones, and poorly thought out RPGs. Nobody really went above and beyond and pushed the engine to its limits. And yes, here and there I did see a few things that were extremely impressive with physics and color and lighting that really went far beyond my expectations, but nobody wanted to put it all together. And while we're on the subject, let's talk about the Create mode, arguably the most popular mode on the game. See, Create mode was in the middle ground in the worst possible ways. It was too complex to be beginner friendly like Kodu, and if you wanted to create pretty much anything, there was actually a decently high skill gap. But in the same vein, it just was not advanced enough to give you skills that could transfer to an actual game engine. It was far too simplistic, way more simple than some of the most basic game engines on PC like Game Maker and Construct. It also provided you just enough assets that you could make something, but everything that looked interesting and everything that was shown off in the trailers was locked behind a paywall, of course. And look, even if you wanted to go out of your way and pay for all those asset packs, if you were really interested in making games, then your money would be better spent with an actual game engine. And even if that isn't an option, even if you didn't own a PC, They just didn't go far enough with the game creation aspect in my opinion. The games you made could only be published to the Project Spark community on Xbox and PC. It couldn't be uploaded to an external marketplace or directly to your PC or anything of that nature. So ultimately, what was the point of making a pretty feature-rich game that no one would play? And at upwards of $100 to reach that point, it was a steep buy-in. And unfortunately, most players decided not to. In conclusion, this game was a complete failure. The game may have had its community, and by the looks of things, there's still a few players clinging on to hope. But the game failed. Microsoft no longer talks about it, just like those other 3 important games I mentioned at the beginning. They obviously have no plans of making a sequel or successor, and even the team that actually developed it, Team Dakota, has already dissolved and all of its team members have moved on to different studios. And would the community even want it back if they could have it? Well, looking at Twitter and Reddit, you can see a few people talking about it and a few people posting their user-made games, but nobody is clamoring for a comeback. In fact, most tweets talking about it are just taunting Xbox, talking about how much of a failure it is. And it's compared a lot to upcoming projects. I'm assuming those games fans don't want it to turn out like this one. I'm extremely nostalgic for this game. I loved it when it came out and I sank hundreds of hours into it, but honestly, I don't even think this game needs to come back. But I do hope they make a successor one day, because like they say, third time is the charm. And that's it for today. This has been Phanta. If you watched all the way through, drop the spark in the comments so I know you did. Thank you so much. For everybody that stayed subscribed through this long hiatus, I thank you guys a lot. This is my new style now. This is what I'm really going for. I really want to do a 50-50 split of video games and anime content. So if you were looking for anime only, there are other channels for you. We're going to be splitting it up a lot here. But thank you all for sticking around. Make sure to like, subscribe, share the video, all that sort of stuff. And I really hope you watch my next video, because next time we're talking about The Voice. Thanks for watching.